The pen didn't just touch paper that day, it detonated a decision that would quietly erase Prince Harry from the future of the monarchy, and nobody saw it coming until it was already too late. Inside those closed palace walls, where silence is never accidental and every pause carries weight, King Charles didn't hesitate for long. A few seconds. That's all it took. A signature so controlled, so deliberate, that it didn't just end an argument, it rewrote the future. Because this wasn't some symbolic warning. This wasn't a temporary freeze. This was a final sovereign order, and once it was signed, there was no undo button waiting quietly in the background. Think about that. Every future state moment, every coronation, every diplomatic reception, every ceremony meant to define history, Prince Harry was now completely cut out of it. Not distanced, not paused, removed permanently, and the most unsettling part, nobody told him before it happened. The room itself felt heavy even before the ink dried. King Charles read the final paragraph twice, not because he didn't understand it, but because he knew exactly what it meant. This wasn't just a legal move. This was personal, deeply personal. The kind of decision that lingers long after the room empties. The kind that follows you when the cameras are gone and the doors are locked. The senior private secretary stood there, watching, waiting, not interrupting, because in that moment, even the smallest sound would have felt like interference. And when the pen finally came down, when that signature locked everything into place, something shifted, not just legally, emotionally, permanently. Then came the question, the one nobody expected him to ask out loud. Was there any path back? That's where it gets colder, because the answer wasn't emotional. It wasn't comforting. It was mechanical. Only another sovereign order could reverse it, which means this decision didn't live in feelings anymore. It had been moved into the system, into the machinery of the monarchy itself, a place where regret doesn't change outcomes. And that's when the silence became unbearable. William received his copy separately, sealed, untouched, and for a moment, just a moment, he didn't open it. He stared at it instead, because he already knew, not the exact wording, but the weight of it, the finality. And here's where things start to fracture in a way the public never fully sees. William didn't ask what was inside. He asked if Harry had been told. No, that answer changed everything. Because in that instant, William realized something chilling. Harry was still living in the last few minutes of a life that was about to disappear, completely unaware, still standing on a version of reality that had already been rewritten behind his back. Camila saw it too, not the document itself, but what it had done to Charles. Because while the world would later argue whether this was discipline or cruelty, she saw something far more complicated. A man protecting the crown by wounding himself. And that line, that brutal, invisible line, it had just been drawn. Harry could still be a son, in private, behind closed doors, but in public, in history, in the official narrative of the monarchy, he was gone. And thousands of miles away, Harry had no idea. No warning call, no quiet hint, no final conversation to soften the blow, just silence. The kind of silence that feels harmless until you realize it's hiding something massive. But here's where the story tightens, because this decision didn't come out of nowhere. No, this had been building, quietly, repeatedly, through interviews, tensions, disagreements that never quite resolved. Every moment stacking on top of the last, forming a pattern that nobody wanted to fully acknowledge, until one specific moment changed everything. A conversation. Private, controlled, almost calm on the surface. But underneath, explosive. It happened during preparations for a national remembrance ceremony. The kind of event that isn't just about the family, it's about the country. The symbolism matters. The roles matter. Who stands where matters. And Harry didn't like his position. He could attend, but not as a working representative. Not in the sovereign's procession. Not in the role he believed he still deserved. So he pushed. And Charles didn't move. That's where the tension sharpened. Because this wasn't just about attendance anymore. It was about identity, about whether being born into the monarchy still guaranteed a place inside it. Charles explained it carefully, measured, controlled, but firm. Family and state are not the same. But Harry didn't hear a distinction. He heard exclusion, and that's when the line was crossed. Because what came next wasn't a demand, it was a warning. If the arrangement stayed the same, he would explain it publicly. Now pause there, because that single statement, that was the turning point. Harry may have meant it as self-defense, a way to control his own narrative. But Charles heard something entirely different. Pressure directed at a state event. And in that moment, something inside Charles closed. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly, irreversibly, William walked into the room just as the aftermath settled. No shouting, no chaos, just two men standing, the chairs untouched, the air thick with something unspoken, and Harry walked past him. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence, the kind that says everything. And after that door closed, Charles didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He didn't revisit the conversation. He gave one instruction: prepare a permanent framework. The moment the order crossed the Atlantic, everything changed, not loudly, not with some explosive announcement, but with a cold, almost surgical precision that made it even harder to process. Harry didn't receive rumors or leaks. Harry received it as a completed act, already sealed by authority, already beyond negotiation, already sitting in the category of things that don't get undone easily. And that's what made it so suffocating. There was no buildup left, no warning phase, just impact. The phone call ended, the silence settled, and Harry stood there knowing that something fundamental had been taken without any final conversation to soften it. Meghan saw the shift immediately. Not anger at first, not even disbelief, just a strange stillness, like the moment before a storm fully arrives. Harry asked for the full document, not a summary, not an explanation every word, because Harry understood something most people would miss. This wasn't about one invitation or one ceremony. This was about whether Harry would ever again stand inside the official history of the monarchy. And when the document appeared, when those lines became visible instead of abstract, the reality hardened. Future coronations, state ceremonies, diplomatic events. Every path that once connected Harry to the visible structure of the crown had been closed in one coordinated move. And then the consequences started before the emotions could even catch up. Conversations that were once possible simply stopped. Plans where Harry's name might have appeared quietly disappeared. Internal lists, those silent contingency plans that map out who stands where if something changes, no longer included Harry at all, not even as a possibility. That's how deep the order reached. It didn't just remove presence, it removed the idea of return from everyday planning. Charles's recorded message arrived alongside the document, and it carried something that made the entire situation more complicated, not less. Because Charles didn't close the personal door. Charles said contact remained possible. Charles said meetings could still happen privately. But the crown was now sealed off from negotiation. And Harry listened, once with Meghan, once alone. And something shifted in that second listen. Not acceptance, not forgiveness, but recognition. Because when Charles paused before saying "my son," the authority cracked just enough to reveal something underneath it. But Harry still didn't respond. Then William called, and that call, quiet, unscripted, completely outside the controlled structure of the palace, became the only space where anything real could still move. No advisors, no prepared language, just two people who had shared a past that neither distance nor conflict could erase. And for several seconds, neither of them spoke. Because how do you start a conversation like that? How do you reduce years of tension into words that don't immediately break under their own weight? Harry asked the question directly. Did you know? William answered just as directly. Yes, that answer could have ended everything right there. But William didn't stop. William explained that the decision had already hardened long before the final draft. William explained that the confrontation over the remembrance service had shifted something fundamental in Charles's view. And most importantly, William revealed something that almost nobody outside that room would ever understand. William had fought to keep one clause alive, the possibility that a future sovereign could revisit the decision, not reverse it immediately, not promise change, but not lock it permanently beyond reach. That detail changed the temperature of the conversation. Slightly, not enough to heal anything, but enough to shift it away from total collapse. Harry admitted the warning about going public had come from frustration, not strategy. William admitted that Charles hadn't heard frustration, Charles had heard a threat to every future state event. And that difference? That misinterpretation? That was the gap no one had been able to bridge. They didn't fix it, they didn't resolve it, but they stopped the free fall. No apologies. No dramatic reconciliation, just a fragile pause where both sides stepped back from the edge. And when the call ended, something small but significant had changed. Not the order, not the outcome, but the understanding of how it had happened. By morning, the world had already taken over the narrative. Screens lit up, headlines spread, and the framing split instantly. Some saw strength, others saw cruelty. But the image that stayed, the one that cut through all the analysis, was simple. A headline, a crowd, and the realization that Harry would never again stand inside those moments that define the monarchy in public view. Charles watched the reaction unfold in fragments, not all at once, carefully, quietly. And when Charles learned that Harry had chosen silence instead of immediate retaliation, the response wasn't relief. It was something closer to reflection. Because silence, after everything, carried its own weight. It meant the conflict hadn't ended, it had gone deeper. William understood that better than anyone, because now William wasn't just standing between two positions. William was standing inside the consequence itself. The clause existed, the possibility remained, but it came with a burden that wouldn't disappear. disappear. One day, William might inherit not just the crown, but the decision, and that meant choosing whether to reopen something that had already cost so much. Harry placed the physical copy away instead of destroying it. That detail mattered, because it showed something beneath the anger. Not surrender, not agreement, but a refusal to reduce everything to reaction. Meghan stood beside Harry, not softening the reality, not pretending the pain wasn't there, but refusing to let it define everything moving forward. Charles made one final adjustment that almost went unnoticed. Communication would remain open, not public, not ceremonial, but direct, personal, without unnecessary barriers. And that single decision created a narrow path that hadn't existed before. Because even after everything, even after the order had sealed the public separation, the private connection hadn't been completely erased.